Ready? If you so much as haunt alongside with your presence and access human shields for refugees who have already been sentenced to death, we will kill you. This is North Korea's chilling message to South Korea in response to the activist launching of propaganda balloons. We on Side Proposition today believe that North Korea is uniquely hyperreactive, which is why we believe that the South Korean government has an obligation to first and foremost take measures to ensure the safety of all citizens. And banning propaganda balloons is the first step to security. Therefore, we proudly propose the motion that, resolved, South Korean government should ban the sending of propaganda balloons to North Korea. Before we move on to our constructive case, we would like to define propaganda balloons as balloons that carry material from South to North Korea that are intended to encourage North Korean citizens to defect or revolt. Now let's go on to our constructive case. Contention 1, stability on the Korean Peninsula. Subpoint A, free speech limitation. In the real world, however democratic a nation may be, freedom of speech is never absolute. For example, one cannot shout fire in the theater or bomb on a plane. As such, Article 37(2) of the Korean Constitution states that all constitutional rights can be limited under circumstances that endangers public security. Furthermore, the National Security Act limits people's right to endorse North Korea and communism as it undermines national security. Article 19(3)(b) of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, ICCPR, states that free speech can be limited for protection of national security or public order. Similarly, on January 6th, according to the Korean Herald, the Ulcheonbu District Court of Korea stated that propaganda balloons could be limited for reasons of protecting national security. Subpoint B, national security threat. On October 16, 2014, according to Korea Times, over 50 rounds of bullets were exchanged between North Koreans and the South Korean military as North Korea fired into the regions from where these balloons were sent from. Furthermore, on January 14th, according to Channel A, Kim Jong-un ordered his troops stationed near the DMZ to start practicing for attacks into regions of Paju and Yeoncheon because of these propaganda leaflets. We cannot assume forever that North Korean threats will stay empty. Because there is a reasonable probability of attack, we should be responsible and take measures to prevent deaths. Contention 2, counterproductive. Subpoint A, hinders peace negotiations. On January 1st, according to Euronews, Kim Jong-un expressed will to resume high-level talks that had been suspended. However, because of the launching of another round of propaganda balloons, he quickly retracted this statement. On January 9th, according to Joseon Ilbo, North Koreans issued an ultimatum that we either choose to continue negotiations or bring relations to the brink of rupture with the continuation of propaganda balloons. We will not allow the actions of a few radicals to turn upside down the opportunities to discuss fundamental issues such as denuclearization and disarmament, discussions that cannot happen between citizens. Propaganda balloons close the platforms on which to discuss these issues. Subpoint B, harmful to North Koreans. According to John Pfeffer, co-director of the Institute for Policy Studies, the balloons might land on the roof of a farmer's dwelling, leading the North Korean authorities to dragging the unwitting fellow in the suspicion that he stowed it there on purpose. Pfeffer says that propaganda balloons led to a crackdown on North Koreans in 2013 on its citizens. Although these activists are trying to be humanitarian, they are causing counterproductive and counterintuitive results. In addition, as the Conti may say, these propaganda balloons could incentivize certain defectors to come across. However, because of the 3-generation punishment policy, for every one defector that crosses the border, we are putting 3 generations at risk, possibly 10 or even 20 people. A ratio of 1 save for 20 lives in labor camps is in no way humanitarian, and therefore diplomacy is the best way to go. Ultimately, actions of these activists, actions that provoke North Korea, are reversible. The deaths that the Con team today may instigate are not. Jay Lefkowitz, envoy for North Korea under Bush's administration, has said that such a provocative stance toward North Korea is tantamount to an invitation for Pyongyang to strike South Korea. Let us be realistic and vote proposition. Thank you.
Imagine you were forced to leave your brothers, sisters, and other beloveds behind in the country you ran away from in terror, North Korea. And now you're here, safe with a new life. You're happier and healthier, but you don't feel complete because you don't have them by your side. You want to inform your loved ones of what's really going on, what sort of propaganda they're living under, what terrible conditions they're living under, and how unfairly they're being treated, but there's no way to reach them. In order to finally bring the peninsula together, you choose to send propaganda balloons. Today, we are here to proudly debate that the South Korean government should not ban the sending of propaganda balloons to North Korea for three main contentions. Firstly, the right to freedom of expression. The right to freedom of expression is not thoroughly protected if the sending of propaganda balloons is prohibited. According to the Constitution of the Republic of South Korea, the right to freedom of expression, a fundamental right of all people of South Korea and in all democratic nations, is enforced as the 21st article of the second chapter of the Constitution. It states that all citizens are guaranteed the freedom of speech, the publication and assembly, and has the freedom of association. Clearly, sending propaganda balloons is a form of freedom of speech and or publication, and gathering social activists is a form of the freedom to assemble. Whether the social activists that send propaganda balloons are plain Korean citizens or North Korean defectors, whom are considered South Korean citizens by law, according to the ASEAN Institute for Policy Studies, the Constitution, the legal foundation of South Korea itself, states that all citizens, regardless of shape and size and origin, must be guaranteed their freedom of expression. Therefore, if the South Korean government were to officially prohibit the sending of propaganda balloons, they would be defying their own constitution and depriving their own citizens of their fundamental rights. Secondly, the threat of war. The empty threats from the North Koreans are unrealistic. Whatever threat the North Korean government implies toward the North Korean citizens for receiving the flyers within the propaganda balloons or to the South Koreans for sending them, all are either unrealistic or impossible to enforce for all people at all times, or have minimal effect on the security of a nation as a whole. It is true that North Korean government took militaristic action to respond to Korea's propaganda balloons, but it is unlikely their actions will ascend to be great enough to cause any real casualties, let alone war. According to NK News from October 15th, the weapons in the North Korean army are obsolete. Most soldiers in North Korea carry automatic rifles which weigh about 7.9 pounds. They can load up to 30 rounds. I heard they were the same old guns that they used in World War I. New weapons are hardly found in the North Korean army, and that's it. Even those guns are very old, which leads to frequent accidental discharges among my own colleagues. And aside from the possibility that North Korea may use nuclear weapons, there is little chance, if any, that North Korea wins a war in light of its poor weaponry and unmotivated soldiers. The shots they fired across the border on October 15th after propaganda balloons had no casualties because they were not aiming at people, they aimed at the balloons. It was a mere threat to try to scare off the South Koreans. Due to this clear advantage that the South Korean army has, along with the US military, the most powerful military in the world, on their side, North Korea wouldn't dare wage war, making the threat of war unrealistic. And also the threat of death penalties to North Korea that receive the messages that do propaganda balloons send are unlikely to be carried out in actuality to all that do receive these messages, and even if they were to be harmed by these messages, no pain, no gain. This is all for the greater good of uniting the Korean Peninsula. Finally, the sending of propaganda balloons is effective propaganda and helps unification. Propaganda balloons have been proven as effective propaganda and can be seen as a daring, yet rewarding and revolutionary movement in history, step towards the unification of the Korean Peninsula. Propaganda balloons have been proven as effective in revealing the antics of the North Korean government, thus weakening the government, as well as causing more North Koreans to cross the border to South Korea. According to interviews of activists that were done in a CNN article published on May 31st, 2010, many activists who were originally North Korean defectors said, "It worked for me," said Kim. "I thought maybe this is propaganda from the South," he said. The important part, he said, is that he began to question the unquestionable military in the North and the regime. And therefore, we believe that we ask you to vote for opposition.
We have 30 seconds.
No, I mean I'm on a different one because that one kept crashing.
버전이 낮은 것 같아요. 그래서 그 휴대폰
Okay.
안드로이드 앱 버전이 낮아서 떴는 것 같아요. 확인을 해봐야 되는데.
Second Inter-Korea High Senior Level Military Agreement Article 3.1 explicitly states that both countries have promised to ban such propaganda leaflets from being sent over on one another's border. Do you think that this violation of a senior level military agreement is an act of extreme provocation, severing all the negotiations and even instigating war?
we agree that yes, it is a violation of whatever pact that was, but we believe that in the course of history, in order to bring change, there must be some rule breaking. There must be bending the laws. The world has to be a lot more flexible than this. In order to bring peaceful unification in the near future, in order to benefit the entirety of the Korean Peninsula, there must be some changes and there must be movement quick. Right now, without any of these negotiations and propaganda activities to bring defectors towards South Korea, it is unlikely that North Korea and South Korea will be able to merge as one country in safety. And we believe that for the benefit of the North Koreans as well as the South Koreans, this is completely justified action. We also want to ask, are you for or against unification?
We're for unification, but we're not for radical and fast reunification that leads to more casualties within North Korea, and we cannot guarantee security and liberty for these people if we do not have diplomatic changes. Because ultimately what we will be seeing is that these defectors, one defector comes over and 10 or 20 lives are lost in these certain regions. So we think that that's more harmful to the North Koreans as well as the South Koreans. We think that we want reunification, but diplomacy is the way to go, not propaganda.
May I ask a follow-up? Are you aware that there haven't been any successful diplomatic talks since 2007? And from 2007 until now, Kim Jong-un has refused to have proper diplomatic talks face-to-face with Park Geun-hye that discusses unification?
We would wholly deny the fact that diplomacy hasn't worked. Because simply looking from the context of the Korean Peninsula right now, it has been very different from the 1980s and the 2010s. The relationship and the tensions have changed during this era mainly from 1998 to this certain time when the Sunshine Policy was implemented, right? We see that diplomacy in this case has brought work. However, we would like to question your propaganda balloons. Propaganda balloons were active since 1970s, and onward, they're having worse relations just because of these propaganda balloons. How do you propose that we actually have diplomacy and save all these people from propaganda balloons?
Could you shorten your question? How do we what?
So basically, propaganda balloons have been there since 1970s. And according to your logic, if they were so effective, then we would already have reunification. But it has only worsened the relationship between North Korea and South Korea and hasn't caused any simple relationship tensions to get alleviated.
That's a very extreme way to view the situation. You can't just say that, oh, if propaganda balloons were so effective, why didn't we reunify in the past, say, 20 years? 1980s and 2010s, as you said, has improved, and you have no proof saying that propaganda balloons didn't help the situation. Who knows? Maybe it did. According to some interviews from defectors, it worked for them. There are illegal radios, there are black markets, and there are propaganda balloons. There's not only one medium to enforce reunification amongst the people, and therefore you have no proof saying that propaganda balloons aren't helpful.
You can.
Judges ready? Yes. Opponents ready? Alright, then I'll begin. For my speech, I'm going to go over the three fundamental arguments that they gave us from the con side. And first of all is the idea of freedom of expression. Do we think that freedom of expression is an important right? Absolutely. But do we think that it's an absolute right? Absolutely not, ladies and gentlemen. And they gave us a reference to the Korean Constitution. They told us that the Korean Constitution gives everyone the right to free speech. But in the Korean Constitution, ladies and gentlemen, in Article 37(2), the freedoms and rights of citizens may be restricted by the Act only when necessary for national security, the maintenance of law and order for public welfare. So what we tell you is that even under the Korean Constitution, which they refer to, it says that the government does have the right to limit free speech when there is tangible security harms. And we already proved to you the security harms. First of all, we told you that there is a crossfire. They responded by saying that there was no collateral damage, there was no casualties, that these threats are merely empty. But what proof does the con side have today that shows that these threats will stay empty forever? And when we see that there is no proof from the con side, we don't think that we can play on this uncertainty. And also, we give you the ICCPR, the International Covenants on Civil and Political Rights, and the National Security Act of South Korea that all allow the government to limit rights in cases where public security is harmed. Now let's go into their second argument, which is about the empty threats. So we told you that there's no proof that these threats are going to stay empty. For example, we proved causality, that on January 1st, that Kim Jong-un actually stated that we want talks. However, on January 9th, because of the sending of another round of propaganda balloons, we told you that Kim Jong-un actually retracted his statement and said we don't want talks. So we're telling you that these propaganda balloons have a causal effect on actually not allowing diplomacy. We tell you that diplomacy and talks of this denuclearization, talks of disarmament are not possible on a resident-to-resident basis. Just because we send propaganda balloons that reach citizens, it doesn't mean we can solve those issues. It needs to be a nation-nation basis, and if we allow the sending of propaganda balloons to continue, this diplomacy, this opportunity for talks is going to continue to close up. And also, they told you that the North Korean army is obsolete. However, ladies and gentlemen, North Korea's military strength still ranks one of the strongest in the world, and it's more weaponry than South Korea. And also, what we want to say is that we don't think that North Korea has to cause full-out war in order to harm South Korea. For example, the Yeonpyeong and Cheonan attacks, there wasn't full-blown war, however, still there were South Korean casualties. So even though North Korea doesn't have an incentive to cause full-out war, we believe that North Korea can still cause significant casualties on the Korean side, and that is why we believe that we have to prevent certain actions. We need to be proactive instead of reacting to certain actions. Now let's go to the third argument, which is about the effectiveness of, they gave us little proof. They told us, defectors say that this worked. What about the 3 generations that were harmed, that were sent to prisoner camps because of these defectors, ladies and gentlemen? We don't think this is humanitarian or just in any way. And according to Professor Kang of Kookmin University, he said that leaflets have a minimal effect because they are usually picked up in the north by hardly any people. They are also mistrusted because they came from the source of hostile propaganda. So we clearly see that these leaflet propaganda balloons, they have minimal effects, and therefore we don't think that they should be justified in sending effects, especially when we're sacrificing a minimal effect for the entire Korean people's national security. We think that in the case in which national security is tangibly harmed, as we've continuously proved to you, and when the con side cannot predict for us whether North Korea is going to attack or whether it's not going to attack, we don't think that we can take this chance. We think that we have to be proactive. We don't think that we should react after many people have died. And for these reasons, because we think national security is an important issue in this debate, we think that we should vote for the affirmative side. Thank you.
30 seconds.
The opposition team would like to rebut to their 3 arguments. First of all, their first argument of stability of Korean Peninsula. Their subpoint of freedom of speech. They mentioned about Article 37 from South Korean Constitution, and they had stated that freedom of speech can be limited in case of threatening national security. However, the opposition team clearly has a rebuttal to that, because the national security right now in the situation is not harmed. According to the DW article on October 15, 2014, they've stated that there was no practical harm done by the social activists. There was no physical injuries done by the social activists, meaning that the national security of South Korea is not yet harmed. And moving on, they have mentioned about how we can throw out the freedom of speech because they take the more importance. However, according to Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is a customary international law, it states that we cannot put an importance over something for the human rights because they're equally important, thus proving that their first argument is wrong. And moving on to their shots fired from North Korea, they've stated that shots was fired from North Korea, thus threatening the security of South Korea. However, shots were also fired from South Korea, meaning the South Korea had a capability of defending themselves and not threatening national security because they were able to protect themselves. Thus, their subpoint B of shots fired from North Korea stands wrong. And moving on to their second argument of counterproductive. Their subpoint A was Kim Jong-il's
providing high-level talks from Joseon Ilbo. However, South Korean government said that they cannot limit freedom of speech because the citizens have the right to freedom of speech and they can say whatever they want to because this is a human right that South Korean government is different from the North Korean government. And second point of harmful to North Koreans, they've given us 3 conditions: might land an unwanted destination, and second, crackdown on North Koreans, and third, 3-generation policy. Their first statement of might land an unwanted destination, that is wrong because freedom fighters of North Korea have delivered 52 million leaflets, thus proving that they have enough leaflets to provide for everyone. According to CNN on May 31st, 2010, Hwang Young-hee said, "My brothers are still living there." He was a defector and he said, "I'll be happy if they can come home after reading these messages." North Koreans know nothing about Kim Jong-il except for his power as a general and chef of the country. We want them to know the truth. And second of all, a perspective from Kim. He said, listening to the stories, I thought maybe this is propaganda from the South, he said. The important part is that he began to question the regime of North Korea. Just the question led to him fleeing the North. And I want to see that for myself. Meaning that the North Koreans want these propaganda balloons because this ensures that they know about what is happening in North Korea. And moving on to their second point of crackdown on North Koreans. However, this is not true. They have mentioned about in their third argument of provoking North Korea. However, if this is provoking North Korea, this means the North Korean government is agreeing that these propaganda balloons are effective enough to provoke their North Korea and give military talks with South Korean government. And as my partner mentioned about how we have to go through pain in order to get some gain, we need to realize that because the North Korean government is giving empty talks mean that the propaganda balloons have been effective enough to provoke the North Korean government, and the propaganda balloons are useful enough to influence the citizens of North Korea and also provoke the North Korean government, thus proving that our opposition team is right. Thank you. So do you think that as a result of these propaganda balloons, on a resident-to-resident basis, that talks such as denuclearization and disarmament talks continue? We're not saying that military talks can continue. However, we're saying that because there should be a process of where citizens have to go through some pain in order to reach the goal that we want to have. The things that you're talking about military talks actually contradict their third argument of provoking North Korea, because as I mentioned in my rebuttal speech, the provoking North Korea actually means that North Korean got offended by the propaganda balloons, meaning the propaganda balloons were effective enough to let the citizens of North Korea to know what is going on in North Korea. Okay, so what you said that these propaganda balloons are effective because they're true, so we agree that they might be true in some senses, but let's define what effective means. If you're wanting peace, if you're wanting humanitarian for North Koreans, is your intended effect to cause a 2013 crackdown on North Korean citizens? Is your intended effect to say send hundreds of people to prisoner camps? Is that the pain that you want in order for your gain? The fact that you're talking about concentration camps actually strikes me ironic, because the fact that you're talking about few people, the minority of people who are sent to concentration camps, doesn't actually mean that the majority of North Koreans don't actually get to see the propaganda balloons. And what I believe, according to data received from CNN, they said that 80 to 90% actually get the opportunities to see the propaganda balloons, and they realize the ruthless reality that North Korean regime is pressuring on the North Korean citizens. And okay, so first of all, let's assume that all these people can actually see these propaganda balloons. Well, we see to intended harms, because first of all, let's say that they look at these balloons and they do revolt. In that case, the opposition case here cannot ensure that there's going to be a peaceful transition. They can't ensure that there's not going to be a violent crackdown on its citizens. And secondly, what we say is that if these people see the balloons, and in the case that they don't revolt, they'll only be able to imagine a life that they can live, that other people live, but they themselves cannot live. And therefore, we believe that there's a psychological harm associated with that as well.
However, you keep on stressing that the North Koreans do not actually have the opportunities to go to South Korea and that this is a false dream of North Koreans. However, this is untrue because of the fact that we received data from the actual North Korean defectors living in South Korea. They have said this propaganda balloons or propaganda actions made by the social activists in South Korea are effective enough because they got the idea of fleeing North Korea and coming to South Korea.
Okay, so you gave us evidence of individual accounts in which these people say that these propaganda balloons are effective, but
this
you never gave us any proof on whether it's effective on the larger scale, whether it's effective on a national scale. We'll tell you that because of these three-generation punishment policy, that there are larger harms. When one person comes across, 3 generations of family are actually harmed. So when given on a quantitative basis, we think that it's very ineffective.
We do not agree.
Prep time? No? Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, in the summary speech, I'm going to mainly look through 2 key issues. First, does this endanger national security? And second, are propaganda balloons, in fact, even effective? But first, national security. We say yes, this causes harms in national security. Why? We told you that there were 50 rounds of bullets fired. They told us that there are no casualties. But what could happen next time? They have no guarantee that just because there are no casualties, that there's no national security harm. But secondly, we have counter evidence that on January 14th, North Korea practiced drills firing into Paju and Yeoncheon attacks as stated in my speech. Ladies and gentlemen, you don't conduct military drills against another country right in front of another country when you're just having empty threats. Ladies and gentlemen, and furthermore, we continually emphasize the fact that you never gamble with national security as they do with our lives. But secondly, they told us that these weapons are obsolete. Ladies and gentlemen, no matter how weapons are obsolete, they are still weapons. They can cause casualties as seen in the Yeonpyeong attacks, ladies and gentlemen. They've second said that there was retaliation, so it's okay. However, ladies and gentlemen, we see that retaliation is retaliation. It is not being proactive. It is not preventing these lives. It is not preventing Yeonpyeong attacks from happening again. We retaliated during the Yeonpyeong attacks, but it was still a national security threat. Going on to the issue of whether propaganda balloons are in fact even effective at all. We would say that all they have provided us was primary evidence. Ladies and gentlemen, if I say that Obamacare worked for me, does not necessarily mean that Obamacare or all these legislation is effective in fact. Ladies and gentlemen, we've questioned the fundamental basis of their evidence. But secondly, what we would say is that they talked about how these people are going to look at these and be ruthless. But we provided you clear evidence that these people really do not have an opportunity to do this. And furthermore, we told you that it's even more unhumanitarian. And finally, the final base of logic in here was that North Korea put it on the negotiating table because it was important. However, they proved no causality because what we see is that they may be just annoyed with these aviation laws. They may be annoyed that South Korea is continually sending these. They prove no causality why propaganda balloons are effective. Therefore, the North Korean government is putting it on the negotiation table. And for those reasons, we believe that their fundamental basis and their evidence is all questioned. Thank you.
Honorable judge and opponents, today's debate was about national security breach or not. And us, as the opposition side, want to say that this is not a national security breach. Our proposition continues to attack us by saying, what gives you the proof? What leads you to assume that these threats this time aren't going to be empty? We want to ask, what proof do you have to say that they won't be empty? We have no, if it's a hypothetical situation either way, it might be empty and it might not be empty. But a responsible government should not trade protecting the rights of their citizens for something that they're not sure of. There is no national security breach. North Korea has threatened South Korea plenty of times in the past. After Park Geun-hye made a speech at UN criticizing and offending the North Koreans, they said, we will turn the sea of South Korea into a sea of fire. Did they do that? No. Therefore, there is no proof that this threat won't be empty. And also, we have a doubt that they even have the possibility and the capability to do so. Therefore, we believe this is not a national security breach. And we believe that threat from North Korea exists at all times. North Korea is pissed off, technically speaking, at South Korea for more than just propaganda balloons. There are lots of things that North Korea doesn't like about South Korea. Therefore, eliminating just propaganda balloons isn't solving the fundamental problem. Should the government, a responsible government, sacrifice keeping their citizens' rights, the freedom of speech, for something that they're not sure of? If their logic is correct, then we should be banning planes, banana peels, and stairs, because people can technically die from those too. There is no evidence to say that they will die. There is no evidence to say that this is a national security breach, and therefore, the idea that freedom of speech should be limited in the case of national security breach is not fitting in this situation. Freedom of speech comes first in this situation. Also, for contention too, they're ignoring the fact that there is a help in reunification. They said it got better from 1980 to 2010. Yes, it may not be just because of propaganda balloons, but there was help because people said that yes, we defected because of propaganda balloons. There are lots of mediums: black market, illegal radio, propaganda balloons, but together they form a synergy effect, and that is what has led to an improvement from 1980 to 2010. And therefore, we believe that all of their points are invalid, and we carry the weight. Thank you.
He's sad. Yeah.
Speech is absolute, so would you feel safe, or would you be okay with the fact that someone can say fire in a theater?
Fire in a theater in this case is different. Fire in a theater is spreading false information. This is threatening people's lives because they don't know, and this could lead to people trampling when they're running out of the exit because there is no fire. But in this case, we don't know if there's a national security breach at all. There's always been threats from North Korea constantly from various different reasons. Therefore, we cannot say that, oh, if we eliminate propaganda balloons, there will be no threat from North Korea. If South Koreans feel that their life is threatened at all times, then eliminating propaganda balloons isn't solving the problem. Therefore, there is no national security breach.
Can you see that there's no national security breach when there's active attack planning from the perspectives of North Korea in places such as Paju and Yeoncheon, when there are actual exercises happening, when there happen actual crossfires, and when you yourself cannot predict what North Korea is going to do, and when North Korea is hyper-reactive, can you ensure that there is going to be no national security harm?
If you keep saying that North Korea is hyper-reactive, why haven't they attacked South Korea already from 1980s and 2010s? Like you said, the tension in the 1980s was extremely high. And if they're so hyper-reactive, why don't they just go for it? Because they know it's not going to work. They're not that dumb.
So what we would say is the reason that they do not attack right now at this point is because they want diplomacy. And by sending propaganda balloons, you're basically destroying this tie, severing this tie for the whole future of South Korea.
I would like to rebut back to your second speaker. You mentioned about the attacks from North Korea. However, I mentioned in my rebuttal speech continuous that the attack from North Korea didn't put any practical harm on South Koreans. And also South Koreans also did rifle shot fires back to North Korea to show their capability, and meaning that North Korea was threatened by this, and meaning that they realized the military capabilities of South Korea.
The shootings across the board from the propaganda balloons were on October 14, 2014, and in the year of 2015, at the beginning of the year, Kim Jong-un said 2015 is reunification year and said there's no reason to evade the most highest summit. Therefore, propaganda balloons isn't eliminating the cause of diplomacy, so it's not severing ties.
Two responses. First of all, of course, we told you that Kim Jong-un did say that there's going to open up for high-level talks on January 1st. January 9th, according to your news, we told you that they retracted that statement because of the propaganda balloons. And also on January 14th, we gave you evidence that North Korea is actively preparing for attacks against South Korea. So we believe that their evidence is dated in saying that North Korea wants diplomacy. And to answer your previous question on why North Korea hasn't attacked so far, well, of course, we don't believe that North Korea has the incentive to cause full-out war. But we do believe that North Korea has the incentive to cause small skirmishes that could kill South Korean citizens. And what we value every single Korean citizen, and we don't think that we should be reactive, we think we should be proactive. When North Korea has already caused harm to South Korea because of these small skirmishes, the Cheonan attack, the Yeoncheon attack, we don't think that we should take any gambling chances.
So your idea is that appeasement to the bully is always the correct answer? Well, what about World War II? In order to avoid conflicts with Germany, they appeased with Germany and gave them all the territory they wanted, and eventually what did Germany do? They attacked Poland.
We wouldn't say that this is an appeasement foreign policy in the first place, because just because you give negotiations, just because you give into some useless propaganda balloons, does not necessarily mean that you're caving into the other country. You have to look at foreign policy in the basis of national interest. You have to weigh the cost and the benefits, and we should come up with a judgment on that. Just because we say that the costs are too big for this, and that we're calling it off, does not necessarily mean that we're going to appease them every single time, does not necessarily mean that we're caving into their threats.
Propaganda balloons, if they're so small and petty... If propaganda balloons are so small and petty and they don't lead to a constant chain of appeasement, then why are you saying that we should cut it off in the first place? Then why is it even a threat?
Because we're saying that because of these
Last time.
Judges ready? Everyone's ready? I'm gonna sing it.
Okay.
So judges, I don't know if you ever heard the statement. It's better to be safe than it is to be sorry. So if I don't know whether there's homework due tomorrow or not, then I do my homework to make sure that I don't get repercussions from my teacher. We think that this is a rather serious topic. We don't think that we should be gambling with South Korean security. So one of the things that we actually pointed out in this debate today is that they gave evidence from October 2014 that there's no public security threat. But we gave the evidence from a few days ago, 2-3 days ago in fact, saying that there is a new security threat. So the fact that they haven't responded to these new security threats poses a problem that they don't understand the dynamic relationship between North and South Korea. We think that's a very important issue in today's debate. Now let's do the cost-benefit analysis, or maybe should I say cost-benefit that we see today. The benefits, it satisfies a few defectors, and we think that that's the only benefit. Now let's look at the massive arms, the vast array of harms. So first, we pulled up the national security threat, and we all agreed here that there's no way to predict what North Korea is going to do. They're hyper-reactive, and in a case in which they might attack, like the Yeoncheon attack and Cheonan attacks, in the case that they might attack, we need to make sure that that doesn't happen. We have to take a proactive measure. We're not going to have lives we're not going to be able to protect freedom of speech if there are no lives to protect, ladies and gentlemen. And also, let's look at the second factor, which is North Koreans. In larger scope, they told us individual accounts of people who have actually been helped by propaganda balloons. But what we see is that they don't see the larger scope. That according to John Pfeffer of the Institute on Policy Studies, that these propaganda leaflets are unfair because they are more harmful to North Koreans than they are beneficial because more people are sent to prisoner camps as a result of crackdowns more than they actually defect. So we see that because of the three-generation policy that it's not actually effective. And then one major issue that we want to bring out is the issue of diplomacy. We told you that denuclearization and disarmament talks are not possible on a resident-to-resident basis. Just because I tell a North Korean resident that disarmament is important, it's not going to happen. What they do is limit the chances for this diplomacy to happen. In order for them to be, for there to be unification, which is what they want, there needs to be disarmament and denuclearization. This is not possible without nation-to-nation talk, which they limit, because we are the ones that protect security. We think that the pro side should win today's debate. Thank you.
You have 125. I have 5.1.11 on my phone. I have version 5.1.11.
그 version.
구글 플레이 버튼은 안드로이드 버전이거든요.
He said it's the Android version.
Okay.
Okay. It's fine. That.
Fix it.
We'll let it make noise. You wanted to make a noise, right? It makes a whistle.
Even if it whistle.
Or like vibrates or something.
It's stop and send yourself. And it's over. Not when the grace period. But in debate, you can go.
The opposition team clearly won today's debate. First of all, they mentioned about practical harms that we're gambling the national security. However, we have given facts that the national security is not harmed because as we have mentioned from DW article on October 15, 2014, there was no practical harm done by the North Koreans shooting fires at South Korean borders. And also, they have mentioned about Yeoncheon accident. And this is that they have mentioned that this wasn't a big event that North Koreans provoked South Korea. However, Yeoncheon action was not caused by the propaganda activities that have been done by South Korea. So proving that this is irrelevant in talking about today's motion, and they're clearly continuously assuming that North Korea will attack if we take propaganda, if we keep on sending propaganda balloons to North Korea. However, this is not true because they're assuming, they're giving a hypothetical situation where North Korea will declare a war to South Korea, because North Korea, as I have shown before, North Korea doesn't have the capability to do so. And second of all, they mentioned about us giving primary evidences only. However, I would like to give an official evidence from the South Korean government. The South Korean government said on January 5th, 2015, that they will not limit the rights of South Korean citizens, because this is not done by the government of South Korea. However, this is done by the citizens, and they have the right to do so according to the customary law from the United States. And also, they contradicted themselves by saying that propaganda balloons is not the only reason why the North Korean government is threatened right now. They have stated that if the propaganda balloons is not the main reason why the North Korean government is provoked, then why are we debating that we have to limit the rights of the South Koreans? Because if propaganda balloons is not the main reason, we have no right to do so, and if limiting the only cause one of the causes of the North Korean provocation, then how can we assure that the North Korean government will stop sending threats?